Goeiemôre en ek hoop dit het 'n bietjie by julle gereën. Dit lyk of dit hier by ons voorheen vandag. We continue with session 19. We're in Genesis 11 and we're starting with verse 7 to verse 9. And God said, "Let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So Jehovah scattered them abroad from there upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because Jehovah did there confound the language of all the earth. And from there did Jehovah scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. And we discussed in detail yesterday how it's good that God and Yeshua and his disciples, that we are Echad. One Echad, one in truth, united in truth. But it's not good that the enemy and the people mixing the truth with error, that they are Echad. It's not good. That's why God had to confound them and disperse them and scatter them away and make their understanding of each other limited. And we understand also that in the last days, those limitations are getting breached and the people are becoming Echad again in their deception and in their mixed religion and in their world dominion. But quickly, let's have a look at the word Babel. It's from the Hebrew Strong's H894. The definition: Babel or Babylon. Whenever we read these words in the Bible, and we find it all over the Old Testament, we find it all over the New Testament. And we need to learn the physical meaning behind it, as well as the spiritual implication and significance, as well as the prophetic. So we're teaching you all these words and what they mean and what they signify and symbolizes, so that when you get to a certain verse, even in the book of Revelation, and you read about Babylon, then you understand the spiritual behind it and the significance in your life currently. So Babel, it means confusion, and confusion by mixing. Babel is also an ancient site. It's the capital of Babylonia, situated on the Euphrates River. Okay, it's from the root word Strong's H1101, and that is Balal. The root word for Babel is Balal, and that means to mix. Like you mix a drink, you've got water and you've got oros, and you mix it, and once you've mixed it, it's mixed. You can't separate the water and the oros anymore. To mix, to mingle, to confuse, to confound, to mix oneself among others. Remember this, because we're going to get to the rest of this very, very important teaching today. Remember what Babel means: to mix yourself with others, to confuse, to confound, to mingle in between, so that there's no longer a distinction between the truth and the error. Babel also means it's another way, another bab, another gate to Elohim. Babel, another gate to Elohim. So the religion that is trying to show you another way to Yahuwah than the way that Yahuwah describes from Genesis 1 verse 1 is part of this confusion, this Babylonian religious worship system. And remember, we've discussed again from the tree of life, the truth, and from the tree of good and evil, the error, the mixing, the doubt, the confusion that the serpent created in Adam and Chava's minds. Did God really say, "No, you will not die"? But God knows that if you eat from this, He just wants to keep you away from eating of this. Sounds like the kosher laws. Listen, guys, Babylon is much closer to home. It's not just that half-built Tower of Babel in the European Union And we can recognize this and say, there's the one world order, and there's the new world order. And Babylonian mixing is closer to home, and I want you to investigate Babylon, not there with them, but here with you and me. So, back to the physical geographical area. Remember how we saw yesterday in verse 28 that Abraham had to come out of the land of Ur in Chaldea. Chaldea and Ur and Babylon and Nimrod, who built Babylon and Nineveh, and the borders of that area was Sodom and Gomorrah. All of this Abraham had to leave behind. These physical, geographical areas has huge spiritual significance. But we don't always look at that. We just read about the physical history and we forget about the spiritual. But Abraham had to leave Ur of the Chaldeans behind. All that mixed religion and pagan worship and Nimrod with wanting to kill God and take his place. Abraham had to leave all that behind. Just like when Moses came to fetch us out of Egypt, we had to leave Egypt behind. And we have to follow a kosher lifestyle in the wilderness so we can get cleaned up before we enter into the promised land. So we have to look carefully into what Ur and Chaldea and Nimrod and Babylon is all about. But we study the truth, the real dollar bill, so that when we look at maybe something in our own lives, once we know the truth, we can recognize Babylon and Chaldea and Nimrod and mixed religion and doubt and confusion from the tree of good and evil. We can recognize it in our own lives. But let's look a little bit at the physical implication of Babylon. It remains so interesting at the end of the day. Everything in the Bible is just so interesting. Jeremiah 50, verse 1. The word that Yahweh spoke against Babylon and against the land of the Chaldeans. So Babylon and Chaldea, the physical areas, these were synonymous. And the Lord spoke a lot of judgment against this physical area by various prophets. But it also has the spiritual behind it. Isaiah 21:9. And he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, is fallen. That sounds familiar. We read that in the New Testament. And the graven images of her gods has been broken down unto the ground. Daniel 2. Remember that whole dream that the king Nebuchadnezzar had about the statue with the head of gold and the silver chest area and bronze legs, and then the feet of clay and the 10 toes of clay and iron mixed, bronze hips and iron legs, and then the feet and the toes with a mixing, the Babylonian mixing of all those religions. And the 10 kings, the 10 toes, is where the stone that came out from the mountain, that came loose from the mountain without any men's hands, and it hit this statue at its feet at the time of these kings, and it just destroyed this whole religious system. But the head of gold, Daniel said to King Nebuchadnezzar, this is Babylon. The head of gold is Babylon. And the religion of Babylon can be found all the way through Roman, Medo-Persian, and then Greek, and then Roman mythology. And Babylon got a lot of their religion and doctrine and occult information from Egypt. And where did Egypt get it from? Remember, the sons of Ham was Put and Mitzrayim and Canaan. All these ancient pagan nations got their information from Genesis 6, from the fallen angels, from the serpent, this mixed religions. And then it was spread through the Tower of Babel. It was spread. This confusion of religions was spread all over the world, all over the earth. And by the time of the king of Babylon, this was the the predominant religion. And the people that believed in the true God of Israel, of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God from the tree of life, the people that believed in him, was taken captive because they stopped believing. They stopped worshipping. They stopped being obedient to his instructions. And the moment you stop being obedient to the instructions of the God that you worship, you will fall into the hands of the Babylonian king, and you'll be taken into captivity. And you will lose your inheritance and the land that he promised you, the promised land. That's why he had to teach them 40 years in the wilderness how to live, how to get to know his instructions, how to live a holy, obedient lifestyle. It doesn't help that you get saved by the blood of the Lamb and you come out of Egypt, you come out of Babylon, you come out of the land of the Chaldeans. It doesn't help that you come out by the blood of the Lamb and then you continue living in an unholy, mixed, confused religion lifestyle, and you are disobedient to the instructions of God that keeps you holy, clean, and pure. What does the blood of the Lamb help then? It saved you so that you can continue living an unholy lifestyle. It doesn't work like that. That's why he brought us out of Egypt. And he taught us his Torah so that he can take us into the promised land. There are 3 steps. I hope you guys see that. Revelation 17 verse 5 to 6. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So we know that Babylon, the roots of Babylon is in the tree of knowledge of good and evil. It's the mixing of good and evil. It's the mixing of religions. And God hates that. He hates the fact that his wife defiled herself with other gods and other religions. That is an abomination to him. And that's why he had to divorce his wife. And he had to die, because in the Torah you cannot marry a wife that you divorce. So he had to die so that he can woo his bride again and lure her back to him again and marry her again at the end of all times. But whoring, idolatry, is adultery in the eyes of God. Everywhere where we see about prostitutes and whoring and virgins, it's all got to do with your clean lifestyle being a virgin, or your unclean lifestyle being a whore. Even just that one small little disobedience of Chava, when she just took one little fruit and took a bite of it, it was enough to make her and Adam lose everything. Lose that relationship they had with God. We mustn't allow ourselves to be soothed by the serpent language that did God really say, must you be really so full of laws? God is not a God of laws. God is a God of life and love, and his instructions are instructions to life. Yeshua says in John 14 verse 15, if you love me, keep my commandments. Why? Deuteronomy 6, you must love Yahuwah your Elohim. He brought you out of Egypt. He's the only God there is. And you must write the words of the Torah on your heart. We see this all over the word, and yet so easily his laws can just be rejected as being Old Testament and just being for the Jews. And here we see how the serpent has been lying to us, making us believe this deception and go into a Babylonian lifestyle of mixing a little bit of freedom of the law and a little bit of salvation of the blood of the Lamb, mixing it. And it's basically a new religion. It's not the truth. From the beginning, from the tree of life, where God said, stay away from the Babylonian mixing of religion, stay away from the tree of good and evil. Keep yourself holy. We talked about holy mean in Hebrews, kadosh, meaning separated. How did God say that his people will be separated from the rest of the pagan nations? By keeping his law, his Sabbath, He said, Ezekiel 20 and 14 and lots of other places, my Sabbath will be the sign that you are holy, separated from all these other nations. But we reject this because we've been taught a Babylonian mixing of religion, lifestyle, an unclean lifestyle all our lives. We were never taught that we need to get away from this. And this mother of harlots, mother of deception that Revelation is talking about. She's got all the kings of the world in her hand. And she writes the beast, and the whole world, the Bible says, follows after the beast, the Antichrist, Babylonian mixed system. Revelation 17 verse 6, and I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Yeshua. And if you look at the Greek word for witness, when Yeshua said, you'll be my witnesses in the book of Acts, all over Judea, Samaria, and the rest of the world. If you click on the word witness in your Strong's Concordance, you'll find that it means martyr. When we witness the truth from the beginning, Yeshua is the word from the beginning, then we have to become martyrs. We have to circumcise our ears and our hearts. And we must be willing to let God cut away any deception out of our lives. And it might be that some of us will end up being martyrs. Martyrs in your family, in your friends, in your church. And some of us might even end up being martyrs for His name in this new world government. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what kind of martyr you are. You are a witness for Him. And she's drunk with the blood of the witnesses, because the witnesses has become silent. People displaying and revealing the deception has become silent. She has killed them all. Even if they were alive, she has killed the voice of the witnesses, of the martyrs, because nobody is preaching the truth anymore. Everybody is preaching a nice, cozy, lekker, comfortable religion, and it's Babylonian. It's the mixing of a little bit of ink in a pure glass of water, and we're all drinking it, and we're happy, and we are just going on our merry way. The voices of the real witnesses that discusses the truth from the beginning are silent. She kills them either in their families or in their jobs or in their churches, or she physically kills them. But Yeshua said, I have the way, I have the truth, I have the life. Drink from me, I am the way. And the Bible all over from the beginning says, walk in the way. Abram walked with God. Enoch walked with God. They walked in a way, a specific way of living that distinguishes them from everybody else. And not being distinguished means you are mixed and you are confused. You're in a confusion of mixing. You are not distinct. You are not recognizable. And that is Babel. That is Babylonian worship. Revelation 14 verse 8. Remember we read in where was that? Isaiah, about Babylon is fallen. Isaiah 21:9. And here we've got a repetition of it. Revelation 14 verse 8. And there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Yeshua has got wine for us to drink. He gave us cups and said, drink, this is the blood of my covenant. This is my blood. But this whore, this Babylon, this mixing of religions also has wine, and her doctrine is making people drunk and confused. Babylonian mixed religion, religious confusion, synchronicity. that is also used by God to bring judgment and tribulation on his own people, to test his people, to make them come out of Babylon. He has to send Babylon. And he does this before the judgment will fall on the great whore herself. And remember, whoring, it's easy to remember, adultery always symbolizes idolatry. So whenever you read about adultery or whoring, just know that it's got this mixed religious worship symbolism. Jeremiah 32:28. Therefore, this says Yahweh, behold, I will give this city into the hand of the Chaldeans, and into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he shall take it. This is in the time of Jerusalem, when God warned them over and over for how many years? How many prophets? And they killed the prophets over and over again. And the prophets warned them, stop your whoring. Stop going after other gods. Stop being unfaithful to God. Keep his commandments. And if you are not going to do it, then from the land of the Chaldeans, the king of Babylon will come and capture you. And that is exactly what happened. Because of disobedience, the whole world is captured by the king of Babylon. After the king bragged about all Jerusalem's possession, King Hezekiah from Judah, after he bragged about all Jerusalem's possessions with the people that were sent from Babylon, way before Babylon became the enemy, they were still friends with Babylon. He bragged about all the possessions in Jerusalem, and he showed them all the treasures and the gold, and the temple of Solomon. And when you read how Solomon built a temple, he didn't spare no money. And all the instruments and the implements and the ornaments in pure gold. He showed all this to his Babylonian friends, King Hezekiah. Don't make friends with those that want to show you Babel, that wants to show you another way to the truth. You think you can play with a serpent and not get bitten. Ask Adam and Chava. You cannot play with a serpent. You cannot spend time listening to the serpent. You cannot spend time under the shadow of the tree of good and evil. You cannot make friends with Babylon and think you are going to be safe. 2 Kings 20 verse 16 and 17. And Isaiah said to Ezekiel, hear the word of Yahuwah. Behold, the days come, and all that is in your house, and that which your fathers have laid up in store until this day, shall be carried away into Babylon, and nothing shall be left, said Yahuwah, because Hezekiah showed the treasures, the holy treasures of the temple to Babylonian friends. Matthew 7 verse 6. Give not that which is holy unto dogs, and dogs are non-kosher. Neither cast your pearls before the swine, the pigs. Physically don't do it, but especially don't do it spiritually. Lest they trample them under your feet and turn again and tear you apart. What did King Hezekiah do? He showed the holy implements of the temple to his Babylonian friends, the people that did not worship God, the true God. They had a God that they worship, of course. They didn't worship Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. And he showed them the holy treasures. And they saw all this, and they came back a couple of years later, and they burned the temple, and they took all the treasures, and they killed the king, and they took the whole house of Judah into captivity, into Babylon, where most of the Jews are still stuck spiritually today, with their Babylonian Talmud, and they haven't returned to the Torah. They haven't returned to the Word of God yet. They are still in captivity under the hand of the king of Babylon. And we try and teach them Jesus that keeps Christmas. Never will they listen to people teaching them Jesus Christ that keeps Christmas and allow us to eat pig. They are captive in the Babylonian king's hands. We need to show them Yeshua HaMashiach, the Messiah from the beginning, from Genesis 1 verse 1, so that they can also be freed by the blood of the Lamb, the truth, the way. Come out of Babylon, my people. But for us as Christian believers, we also learn these true things, these holy kadosh things, out of the books of the Bible, out of these pages we have been paging through the last couple of weeks. Don't throw this to the dogs. Don't throw your pearls to the swine. They will just trample it. And they will tear you apart. Don't try and convince anybody else of the truth, because the dogs and the swines are not interested. But the people that has a heart for God and that is longing for Him, to go back to that relationship we lost in the Garden of Eden, if God sends them over your way, yes, you share your treasure with them. But we do not share our treasure like Hezekiah with Babylon. And Yeshua says, don't share your treasure with the unclean Babylonian mixed religious world. They will just tear you apart. You can ask me, I know. They will trample those things that you have become, that you have come to see is holy and precious. Don't become a martyr, a witness to the unkosher Babylonian lifestyle worshippers. Become a witness, a martyr to those that are looking for the truth. But also be careful not to take your pearls and throw it into the hands of the swine if you still have some swine in your life. Because the swine in your life will also trample these pearls. Just like Yeshua said, the sower sows the seed and it falls into shallow ground and it shoots up. Yes, the seed shoots up, but quickly the sun dries it out. If there's still swine in your life, Babylonian syncreticity in your life, unkosher lifestyle, physically, emotionally, spiritually, ritually, it's got so many levels, then the seed that is the Word of God will not grow roots. It will spring up, but as quickly as the swines of this world give you issues and give you conflict, then that little plant will just dry up. You need to dig deep so that there's enough deep ground for the seed to grow. Grow roots first. Remember Romans 11. Don't be arrogant and say that I'm a branch. Remember, the roots are bearing the branches. Grow roots first before you even start thinking of showing your branches to this world. Chronicles 2 Chronicles 36 verse 7. Nebuchadnezzar also carried all the vessels of the house of Yahuwah to Babylon, and he put them in his temple at Babylon. And when we look at the religions today, and I'm not talking pagan religions, I'm talking religious systems that is so close. The tree of knowledge was standing close to the tree of life. There's religions that's close to the truth. But the vessels used in the holy kadosh worship of the God of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob has been taken into the buildings and the systems of the Babylonian religions that has mixture of truth and error. And when we look into these religions and we see the symbols of this God of the Bible, we can think that this is the true religion. But here the Bible is showing you that those symbols and those things have been taken out of the temple of God and put into the temple of false gods. Don't look at the symbolism or ornaments or doctrines or anything that looks right in this other Babylonian religions, because you might still be in the wrong temple, looking at the right symbols but in the wrong temple. Come out of Babylon, my people. Come away from the tree of good and evil, my people. Come out of Egypt, my people. Do not eat unclean animals, Noah. Take only one pair of unclean into the ark, Noah, just so that the seed can survive, but take 7 pairs of clean animals, Noah, because the clean is the lifestyle that needs to survive the judgment of God. So Nebuchadnezzar took some of the vessels from the temple of Yahuwah into his own Babylonian temple. This counts for the physical in the time of Judah and the kings of the southern region. But it counts for the spiritual as well, because Judah did not remain loyal and obedient to the law of God. They did not keep themselves pure and holy, set apart from these pagan religions. But it counts prophetic as well. We know now that just a little bit of disobedience and a little bit of mixing brought judgment and exile on Israel. So that the time to be very careful and very jealous of your pearls, of your truth has come. You do not flaunt your pearls like King Hezekiah in front of Babylonians, people who don't care about the pure truth, people who think nothing of mixing truth and error. Because your treasure, just like King Hezekiah, will end up in pagan temples and pagan religion and worship. And your pearls will end up being trampled by pigs. Be careful, because your heart is where your treasure is. And people tend to follow their treasure. And people tend to follow their treasure right back into pagan temples. Follow them right back under the feet of the swine. Remember the parable Yeshua told of the prodigal son. The son that left his father's house. Where did he end up after he spent all his money on whores? Remember, whoring is idolatry. Where did the son end up? In the pigsty. But what was the good news, friends? Even when you've done all this, or this world and the systems and the people of this world, when they are here where they've ended up after Satan throws them away, because he only wants to deceive you and then throw you away. He wants your death. He wants to eat your dust. Then the good news is this son in the parable Yeshua told remembered his father's house. And he decided to get up out of the pigsty, out of Babylonian mixed, unkosher lifestyle worship. And he went back to his father's house. And what did his father do? You know the parable of the lost son. of the prodigal son. Read it again, but now read it with all this understanding. Be thankful, because we do have that promise that we can turn back anytime. And we've discussed Deuteronomy 4, verse 26 to 30 so many times. We have to know that out of our heads by now. Jehovah said, I will scatter you, and you will end up in pigsties all over the face of this earth. But if from there you become obedient to my voice, I will gather you again, and you will be called again the sons of the living God. And Joshua will send out his disciples to catch the 153 fish. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you've missed some previous Bible studies. You need to go back and do them. I'm going to read Deuteronomy to you again. You better start, and me, I better start getting to know these verses out of my head, because this is the plan of God. Deuteronomy 4:27 to 30. And Yahuwah shall scatter you among the nations, among the Babylonian nations, and you shall be left few in number among the heathen. And you shall serve their gods, Babylonian unkosher worship, the work of men's hands. But if from there, from where? From worshipping these other religions, from being in a little bit of a mixed religion that's not the truth. If from there you shall seek Yahuwah your God, you shall find him. If you seek him with all your heart and all your soul, just like Yeshua said, this is the biggest commandment. When you are in tribulation in the end times, and you turn back to the Lord your God and be obedient unto his voice. And finally, I've gone over my time. I'm going to quickly remind you about the spiritual significance of kosher. Can you remember the Hebrew word for clean animals? Strong's H2889, tahor. It means pure. And listen to this definition now. We are not talking about what you eat physically with your teeth only. We've just learned about all this Babylonian and truth contradictions. Listen now again. It's not only about keeping the law physically, but it's about keeping it spiritually. Listen to the definition of tahor, the Hebrew word for clean animals. The definition: pure, clean, ceremonially clean, physically clean, morally clean, ethically clean. Tahor is from the root word H2891, taher. And the definition is to be cleansed, to be purified, to physically, ceremonially, and morally to be cleansed. To be pronounced clean, to perform the ceremony of cleansing, to purify yourself, to present yourself for purification. This is the action. Tahor is the description of clean, and the root word tahar is the action of getting yourself clean. It sounds a lot like what the Christian world calls being reborn. Letting Yeshua wash you clean of all your sin and impurities. Inviting him into your heart so he can clean you from the inside. Ons kom tot bekering. You turn back to God. Let Yeshua wash your sins away. So the Christian world actually, in a spiritual sense, does understand the kosher law. Tahor. Bringing yourself to Yeshua so that he can purify you. But they reject the physical meaning of these laws. And rejecting the physical implication and significance of anything that God took the effort to write down for his people is very, very dangerous. Just ask Adam and Chava. We discussed how Babylon today represents the mixing of religions. We discussed before in the previous studies, remember how the serpent got it right to just put in one drop of black ink in your glass that was filled with pure water. And that one little drop of deception was enough to make us lose access to the tree of life and to lose our relationship with our God, our Creator. Can you remember the Hebrew word for unclean? It was tamei. And tamei is to be unclean, to become unclean, to become impure, to be pronounced impure sexually, religiously, or ceremonially, to defile oneself or to be defiled. Something is unclean when it was clean and then became unclean because of something that made it unclean. As you can see, this is physical and spiritual. We were all clean in the Garden of Eden. What made us defiled and, and ashamed and unclean and rejected? What caused that? Do you remember? It wasn't the eating of the little apple or whatever it was. What is the cause? It was disobedience to the warnings of God. Listening to another husband than the husband from the tree of life. Eating a little apple is nothing, but that little bite represents listening to another God than the one that created you. The true Garden of Eden lifestyle, the Hebrew lifestyle, the kosher lifestyle, and may you not think this is Jewish. The root from the olive tree is God and His instructions. It's not Jews. The Garden of Eden lifestyle is drinking from the living waters with no drops of mixed religion ink in it. The Babylonian tree of good and evil lifestyle, the unclean, non-kosher lifestyle, is drinking that unclean, contaminated water, even if it's just one freaking little drop of ink. But the sorrow from this lifestyle is that the people drinking this contaminated water, they are thinking that they are drinking from the truth, and that nobody is deceived like the people that do not know that they are deceived. No wonder the Jews does not want to believe in Jesus, because the people that preach Jesus to them are themselves in a mixed religion. But what if that people start preaching Yeshua to the Jews? What if that people themselves has turned back to the truth from the beginning and has awakened out of their serpent-induced Babylonian mixed religion sleep and is fully awake to the truth and the God of the truth, and has turned back to this God through the blood of the Lamb, and is living in the way that this God instructs? Do you think the house of Judah will then be prepared to listen? Jews must turn back to Jesus, is what the world says. But I'm saying Jews must turn back to Yeshua. But I'm also saying that Christians must start turning back to Yeshua. Both houses, the house of Judah and the house of the lost sheep of Israel, must turn back to the word of God that He preached from the beginning, Bereshit. The word that every prophet in the Old Testament confirms. The word that every disciple and apostle confirms. This word that became flesh, and He Himself confirms, I don't do anything that the Father didn't tell me first. And then we can study the difficult words of Paul, and we can show both Jew and Christian that Paul, in every instance, has confirmed this word that is truth from the beginning. But studying Paul without you yourself knowing the truth from the beginning will just bring Babylonian confusion and tamei, unclean thinking of lawlessness, while the rest of the world follows the beast and the whore of Babylon and gets deceived. Why? Because the children of God that claims to worship Him is asleep behind the pages